Welcome, everybody, to the next edition of the Stay on Course podcast. Today, I have David Dachinger, and he is a retired fire lieutenant EMT who hosts the podcast Responders, Resilience, and Igniting the Shift Within, where he engages with experts on first responder mental health, wellness leadership, and post-traumatic growth. David also serves as a peer coach for 22-0 and is a two-time Grammy Award nominee as a mixing engineer and producer. And David's journey as a stage 4 cancer survivor since 2014 has fueled his passion for advocating firefighter wellness. And today, I'm super excited because we're going to talk about the ingredients for success for post-traumatic growth, and we're going to unpack 3 essential ingredients about traumatic growth, and that is identity release, meaning making, and mission activation. Welcome, David, to the Stay on Course podcast.
Thanks, Julie. Really happy to be here. And it was one of those things, right, that we connected at PodFest a little while back. You never know what's going to happen when somebody walks up and introduces themselves. So it's great to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, David. And, before I get started, I ask all of my guests, what is your favorite food?
So I'm going to have to go with holy shiitake, which is a kind of pizza that Mellow Mushroom makes. And it's otherworldly combination of mushrooms and some other sauces that it's addictive. It's like crack that you eat. And so that I have to go with holy shiitake.
Oh, wow. Do you make that yourself or do you go out to eat and get it?
Mellow Mushroom, the pizza restaurant chain, has it. That's one of their signature pizzas.
Today, we're going to talk about post-traumatic growth and how to make meaning out of it. David, where do you want to start this conversation today?
So, like a lot of people, I've certainly had traumatic incidents and events in my life, but one that stands out is being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, as you mentioned in my short bio there. This happened in the midst of my fire career, so things were just going along great. I mean, I was loving the job and feeling like, purpose, mission. It was fulfilling on so many levels. And I went to get a haircut, and the barber, Fast Freddy, who's a volunteer firefighter himself, he's like, "What's that on your neck?" And he pointed to something in the mirror that I had no idea was there, but it was a small lump here on my neck that I was like, wow, I didn't, had no idea. So first it was, the thought process was, oh, that's got to be a pulled muscle or something. But went through the whole battery of diagnostic tests and got the result of you have stage 4 cancer. Now, right in that moment of receiving the diagnosis, the first trauma happened. I shut down to the point where all I heard was cancer. And if not for my wife, who heard the whole thing, telling me, "No, he said you had stage 4 cancer," I would have just been like, I was numb anyway. It was one of those things that you can't prepare for. So that immediately changed my identity from the firefighter EMT, who is, totally going in to help people, take care of people. We take care of them in the ambulance, starting IVs and doing all kinds of, vital signs and interventions to help them, to an immediate shift to now I'm the patient. I'm the one that's getting the IVs. I'm the one that's going through the diagnostic tests.
Wow.
I'm the one that has to step out of that identity, and it was not an easy thing to do. Really threw me for a loop, and I had to almost like incorporate some grace to go, all right, this is what's real right now.
Right. So because you were identifying as a cancer victim, and that was kind of all you were seeing at the moment.
It's so easy to do that, and when your world is rocked like that, standing in the kitchen talking to the guys on my shift, going, "Hey guys, I've got to basically take a leave of absence, and I don't know how long I'm going to be gone." Then you are, I'm not part of the team anymore for that. So it's so many kind of losses happen instantly.
Right.
And like you said, the victim identity is a really easy one. Like, why me? Why did this happen to me? What caused this? I had to kind of let it play out. And then I realized, okay, this isn't serving me or anyone else. What else is possible in terms of how to view this cancer journey? So I at that point made a pivot, and the pivot was all right, what's the gift in this? What do I have to be grateful for? What can I learn from this? What is my body trying to tell me?
Oh, I
Because
love that.
I have the laundry list of, yes, I was exposed to 9/11. I was exposed to all these toxins on the job. You know, grilled hamburgers in a Teflon pan back in the day. But who knows,
Who
right?
knows, right? Well, how long did it take from the time that you got diagnosed to the identity shift that you were having to say, maybe I don't want to identify as a cancer victim?
Whatever it takes. And so, yeah, everything from nutrition to exercise, I continued to exercise, but it was like a mindset shift to, okay, I'm not going to be that, that kind of cancer patient. I want to be one that is going
Yeah.
to, they say battling cancer or fighting cancer. I never liked those terms, but it was more like embracing life. Like, how can
Yeah.
I embrace life, not death?
So like, okay, so I just want to like set the stage here. You're getting the treatments. I've been to the those infusion centers. I had to get iron infusions for like months. So I know what it's like to be in that space, right? With and everybody there is getting chemo where I was getting my infusion. I was going there to get I looked at it as I was getting a spa treatment and everyone else was getting, because I really needed the iron. It was really a problem for me. But it was very sad to see the cancer patients there. But and so you're in the infusion center and then like one day you just had this revelation that it was like one day you were like down and out and you're like not feeling like this is going anywhere and you're there, you have a revelation and then you change, right? It's a one day event.
I would say it's more of a gradual thing. I don't
Okay.
really have like a lightning bolt moment
It
that,
wasn't a lightning bolt moment. All right. I was trying to figure out like was it this one moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to stop this and get that brain fire of an aha, but it was okay, so it was a bunch of moments that brought you there.
yeah.
Okay. So then the identity release was you releasing the identity of cancer and just kind of saying I want to live my life.
Yeah, it's really some of it's word choice, right? Like, I have cancer. It was not a term that was going to serve me. Living with cancer or living with the diagnosis, that's a little better. But
Yeah.
again, it comes back to like focusing on life, like being grateful for life. Like instead of focusing on all the things that were going wrong at that point in time in my life, God bless my wife. She was like, we'd go for a walk and she'd say, what are three things you're grateful for? And we would just kind of go back and forth, actually round robin as we walked. I'm grateful for our kids. I'm grateful we have medical insurance. I'm grateful we have
Yeah.
great doctors and nurses. And your mindset starts to shift. Your perspective starts to shift from the dark and traumatic piece of it to, okay, we're looking at what is actually going well in this moment. It's shifting with the present moment awareness rather than worrying about what's going to happen, what just happened before, what's next, what's my next MRI scan going to show. Really need to like do whatever it takes to keep ourselves as centered in the present moment as possible. And that's kind of what the gift that I got at that point in time.
I love the gift. I love this. I have been dabbling in learning more about quantum physics and the creation frequency and all that stuff. And so what you are doing is you are literally using your words to create a whole new environment in your life. You are
Mhm.
using your words to create a different response from your body because you are feeling better. The words were medicine. The words were medicine to your body as you were speaking them over yourself.
Right. Yeah. And this is something that we all do, right? We have negative self-talk. We have these like negative beliefs that we buy into at some point in time, and we just keep them, right? We keep them almost as like a mental loop that's playing over and over and over. So I think this was an opportunity to like, all right, let me change the language on this loop to something that's not going to be, detrimental, but something that's going to serve me better moving forward.
I love it. I mean, I love, love, love this because here we are 10 years later. And what's happening right now for you? And we'll go through some of these other pieces. I want to talk about the other three ingredients, but like what happened as far as your health? Like how did you get, because you look fantastic. You basically were giving a death sentence.
Every cancer is different, right? I happen to have one that had a better survivability than some others. But
Hmm.
it's also one that at the stage it was at, that it's common for people to be hospitalized because they can't get enough nutrition. I was having radiation to my head and neck, and that can basically ruin your ability to taste food or even swallow it. So
Wow.
again, thank you, thank you to the universe for giving me a wonderful spouse who was an incredible caregiver, and she was able to come up with shakes, like make nutritious shakes that I could get down that helped me not lose an extreme amount of weight, which is a typical thing for that type of treatment. And
Right.
so that continuing to exercise, but I think above and beyond everything else, some sort of a spiritual, positive mindset, gratitude practice was really the overarching thing that kept me resilient through that point in my life.
Yeah. I love that. So cool. It's such a happy story. I love this story. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he had 2 years. It really, it was a 2 year sentence. It was a 2 year death sentence for him, and he's gone now. But, you often wonder if technology could have helped, if his positive mindset could have helped. But I think when you're ready to go, you're ready to go. So he didn't have the fight in him that you did. So let's talk about meaning making. How does meaning making help the process of overcoming trauma?
Right. So it speaks back to like what we were talking about with beliefs, right? We can look at things and we create meaning out of everything, right? An event happens to us. It may happen to, say, 4 people. And I use this example all the time. Like in the firefighting world, 4 of us would respond to, let's say, a car wreck. And it could be, say, a teenager in that car. And so let's say it was a bad wreck. So 3 of us could walk, do the job, do everything we had to do to process that emergency, and then go back to the firehouse. And the fourth person would carry it as a trauma. Now, why would that fourth person have a different outcome than the 3 other guys? Well, it's what the meaning they put to it, right? Maybe that teenager looked like their teenage son or daughter, right? Maybe they had some other connection to it in some way, a smell, something
Yeah.
they saw or felt. So they create meaning around that, and that becomes a trauma. It becomes a distressing emotion connected to that trauma. They may drive by the same spot where the wreck happened and have like an adverse reaction, sweating palms, increased heart rate. And again, it's like we take something and we create meaning, and that's entirely up here, right? It's our creation. It's our
Yeah.
mind movie, if you will.
Exactly. I always say the story we tell ourselves about ourselves is the most important story we will ever tell. But the story we tell ourselves about anything is important, especially when it comes to trauma and what we're going through. And David, let's parallel this to business owners, because we have a lot of business owners listening here. And I was telling you the story before. I was working with my bookkeeper yesterday, and for some reason, I was noticing the different areas of trauma that I have. And one of them is money. One of the trauma I have is around money. I come from very poor. My family was poor, right? We were immigrants. We came here from Poland, Russia, Italy. I'm a mix of a bunch of different immigrant relatives. They all came through either Ellis Island or a different boat. They all came over on a boat, but they didn't have anything. And so money was a thing, and you saved your money and you cherished your money, that kind of thing. So anything about money, but I do love to spend money, but at the same time, I don't like to dive into my finance. I'm actually feeling stress and anxiety in my body. I want to run from it. I want to flee from the moment and just get out of there. But I'm also continuously making that a thing. Like I can change that story.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to what you're talking about, Julie. I grew up with grandparents who are, basically children of the Depression. And so my grandmother would have, cabinets full of canned food in the basement because that was her mentality, right? They were very frugal, but at the same time, they were generous. And so I grew up with that and I carried it forward. And I had kind of a lack mentality, if you will, throughout most of my early careers. And then at a certain point, I heard this and it made my life so much easier. And I still use it to this day. And that's to use this simple phrase, I am money. And that I'll use that when I'm looking at my bank account every day. You know, you get the emails from your different checking, savings accounts, and I'll look at an email and I'll just say, I am money. And I'll look at my bank accounts online. I'll say, I am money. Because at the end of the day, money is kind of like an energy thing, right? Money is this magical thing that has the potential to change people's lives, usually in a good way. So once we start to look at not a lack, but we are actually abundance ourselves, we are capable of creating all kinds of amazing things, one of them being money. And money is just an energetic expression of what we're able to create as human beings on this planet.
Yep.
Ever since I've employed that, for me, money's, I never have had to worry about it. It's just a
It's
thing,
just there.
right?
The money's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. You know, even if you go into Bible scriptures, because, you know, I spent a lot of time learning the Bible, you know, ask and you shall receive. Believe that you have already received it. Like, you know, these are universal godly principles, whether you believe in God or you believe in Buddha or or you're Jewish, you know, like they're all of the things. And I say that there are principles that transcend religion, you know, because a lot of listeners are going to be, you know, believing in the different kinds of religion. And I think that's fine, right? It's like that these principles hold true. They're universal principles of the earth, right? And if you even look at quantum physics and some of the science, we can see the energy associated with objects. I don't know if you've done any of that research. Have you learned all about that?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, you know, starting with like the movie The Secret, I guess the book The Secret,
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I've definitely, you know, looked into it, and I think it's all consistent with what I've experienced.
Yeah.
We are, at the end of the day, we're powerful creators, right? And you look at things that we're capable of doing when we are, you know, able to kind of just live our best life and to be, you know, have positive mental talk, you know, positive self-talk is really like the core of all of it.
I love that. Well, I mean, like we look at it and back to the cancer diagnosis, there's this thing called placebo. I know everyone has heard of placebo, and magically placebo works, right? When you go to look at the results of the clinical trial, they can see that the placebo is working. That's some stuff. Like when you break that down and you actually think about what's happening there, then it's the same thing as what you did, right? You were believing that you were healed, and you were healed.
Right. Yeah. So we have that kind of power, right? That just kind of bears it out. And that's also comes back to reframing stuff, right? Like how we look at disease and what causes disease. And again, like I think part of my journey was I uncovered the possibility that repressed emotions and not processing trauma could have contributed to my cancer. And so that led me down a journey of exploration to understand that, but also how can I unpack it? You know, how can I heal it in a way that's not going to, you know, show up again in terms of another bad diagnosis.
Wow. You cleared out the negative parts of your trauma and it released a healing inside of your body.
It's an ongoing process, right? We have to continually do it. At least I feel like I do.
Yeah.
And you asked a question earlier. I just wanted to kind of touch on that. And that's, you know, what am I doing today with that? So in the interim, my wife and I created a book and an app for cancer patients and caregivers. And we did about 3-4 years of that. We created a calming waiting room television, which we felt a great need for, because when you're waiting for your scan or waiting for your chemo and you're in this
Right.
waiting room with Fox News or Family Feud, it's incredibly stressful.
So
And on
all
top of
negative energy coming in on your moment of like where you're actually feeling the most stress. Oh my gosh. Okay, tell me about that. This is part of the mission activation. So after all of this, that next ingredient is you turn all of this stuff into a mission and a purpose.
Right. So I'll just kind of capsulize that. We did the TV thing. We wrote the book called Live Calm with Cancer, and we created an app called Loving Meditations that was for cancer patients and caregivers. And we did our own meditations, but also curated with other collaborators from around the world, some in Spanish. And the app was used by some people, doctors, for their patients. And we also just had it out there as a general app. And it ran its course, and it was, it was a great thing. But the funny thing is in my life that after sort of leaving that world for a while, it came back around. And you mentioned in my bio that I'm 22-0 coach. Part of what 22-0 does is to heal trauma and distressing emotions through really powerful processes. And I've been doing that with first responders and veterans. Recently, the opportunity came up to work with cancer patients. And I'm like, I was on the call, kind of the onboarding call. I started crying because this had come back around in my life. And now I have all this life experience and the cancer journey experience. And now the tools of 22-0 to help people who are living with cancer. So that's kind of where, where it all circled back. And it was just one of those like, wow.
Well, it's amazing because you've taken your trauma and your pain and you turned it into purpose. And that's powerful. That's powerful. There's nothing better than like overcoming something and conquering it and just feeling like, wow, this actually happened. And now you can pay it forward. But when you were talking to those cancer patients, like what were the things that you told them that moved you into your healing?
Yeah, well, some of it is, get busy living or get busy dying, to quote Shawshank Redemption. That is the most powerful piece of all of this, right? We can choose to at least appreciate life, even if we're struggling with, our bodies failing us, or we're struggling with really powerful medical interventions that can, sap our energy. But simply go outside and like look at nature, like just look at a flower and go, this is an amazing miracle of life. And we start to focus on that rather than the decay or the downward spiral we may be feeling. That's super powerful. And I think, again, it's like this reframing that we can always choose to do. We can always choose to, look at the positive side or something not so positive. So
yeah,
nature was always a powerful thing. And I would always use that, and I continue to use it as a resource for people who are struggling.
Wow. There's so much here. And so the identity of life and living, you're almost like creating an entire new identity for yourself.
Right. Yep. And that's part of this post-traumatic growth piece, right? We are, there's that great example. The rabbi would tell the story about the lobster, that the lobster grows inside the shell. It gets to a point of discomfort and it's growing too big for the shell. So it has to shed the shell, right? It goes into like kind of hiding so it doesn't get, eaten up by other fish or whatever. And it grows a new shell, but it's like this is kind of a representation of what we do, right? We get to this point, we have to shed the shell in order to grow. And part of that is we can turn our pain into purpose. We can turn that fuel of the adversity into something that is meaningful and changes our identity, changes our mission, and we're able to do something that's positive.
I love this. David, a few weeks ago in the Before I Speak program, you've been to it a few times, we did an activity where I made everybody come up with a superhero version of themselves and then to show up as that person. And because a lot of people were struggling with nerves and speaking and things like that. And so just having a persona, this other version of yourself, and I can imagine it's the same thing. It's like you have this healed version of yourself. And the more you actually step into that healed version of yourself, the closer you become to that person, if that's the version you want to create. Because, in our lifetime and on this journey, there's different versions and different seasons that we have of ourselves. And so I think that it's powerful to do that activity. It's from a coaching perspective, we call this perspectives coaching, where, okay, you have the old persona, the person that is, walking in their trauma, feeling upset. You can apply it to, the person that's in their corporate job that just got on a coaching plan, or the person that's losing their job or miserable at work. That's one persona. And then, and that's the version of yourself. The miserable version of yourself is like prime for getting sick. Like that is like a prime feeding ground for sickness. Be miserable for most of your life and see what happens to your health, right? And then the other version of yourself that is purpose driven, focused on positivity and service, right? It's about focusing on service and meaning, and moving in that space is like, it's the most powerful place for us to be. And it's just a matter of shifting the space and giving yourself the courage to shift into this different version of yourself. I think it's powerful. It's so, so powerful. And, I guess the thing is the jump, right? So what would you tell somebody that needs to make the jump? Like they're in that space of like, woe is me, my life is horrible, I'm sick. How do we give ourselves the permission to have the courage to jump to the superhero version of ourselves?
Well, I love that you're using that superhero metaphor, because very simply, if we look at an adverse experience in our life, and for a lot of people, it's an adverse childhood experience, right? For a lot of first responders get into that profession because they grew up around chaos, and now chaos is their comfort zone, or they had to grow up too fast, right? They became the man of the house at an early age, or they took a lot of responsibility and kind of were problem solvers. And now those skills are incredible skill sets to have as a first responder. Well, to me, that's the perfect example of the superhero metaphor. How did the superhero become a superhero, right? Spider-Man, where the Hulk was hit by some kind of like gamma radiation, right? Spider-Man was bit by a spider, right? And some radiation involved. Or Batman had his moment that made him the Batman. So those were adverse situations that helped make them into a superhero. So we can take that parable, that metaphor, and say, how do I transform these adversities that I've experienced, instead of it being like a negative thing that's going to hold me back? How do I turn that into my superpower?
I love that. This has been a really interesting conversation. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about transformation. I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with transformation, life transformations. And even remember that home edition show? Anything where I can see a before and after. I don't know what it is about that, but I'm obsessed with it. And I'm obsessed with your story, David. I think it's so cool and amazing, and everybody needs to hear it. I hope that everybody listens to this episode a few times, especially if they're fighting something right now, because you are an example of hope, David.
Well, thank you for all that. And, if that's something that I could accomplish by having this conversation with you, or any of the things that I do with my life, that is a complete win. And I'd be honored to, just be part of somebody else's awakening. I think we all need to kind of hear stuff. Sometimes one thing will resonate more than another. And I know in my case, certain podcasts I've listened to, certain books I've listened to have really affect the trajectory of my life. And so that's why we do this, right? We want to just put this out there. And if we can impact somebody positively, then it's a win.
I love this. What is one final thought you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I think it's, suffering is optional, right? We have a choice in every situation. And if we find ourselves thinking that we're in a no choice universe, then we got to think again. There's always choices, even if it's something completely off the wall. Just realize that we are constantly choosing and making choices, and that leads us to our next moment. So I think, suffering is optional. We can make better choices.
I love that. Suffering is optional. Wait, let me say it again, everyone. Suffering is optional. David, where can our audience find out more about what you're doing?
Right. Best place is respondertv.com. That's the website for the podcast, and you can reach us through there. If anybody's interested, 220 is 220 spelled out. And yeah, but those are the main places. And I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
David, well, you are a walking miracle. And I'm so thankful that our audience got a chance to be infused with hope today. So thank you so much for being a guest on the Stay on Course podcast.
Thank you, Julie. It was a lot of fun, and I loved the conversation.